To start the new year by himself, Kyle pours himself a drink and strolls around the Abbott mansion. Claire arrives and blows a noisemaker at the door, much to his amusement. They talk about how Harrison outplays him in games. As she settles in, she reminds him that midnight hasn't arrived anywhere yet. Thus, they still have the opportunity to greet the upcoming year together. They see that it is nearly midnight in Mexico when they check their watches. As they count down, they receive champagne and put on plastic hats. They giggle a little before sharing a kiss. After making out in his room, Kyle and Claire strip and get into bed. He tells her that was a nice way to start the new year after they have sex. He has a strong sense of intimacy with her, as if their bond had become even stronger. She makes him feel safer than anybody else. He has felt comfortable with her from the beginning, even though it is unusual for him to open up to someone so early. She makes everything feel the way it should have always felt. Is she afraid of that? He is everything to her, but she trusts him. She is unsure of her deservingness of this joy. He responds that it simply takes love when she asks if he believes in redemption. He can see how much love is shining on her, even though it sounds corny. Claire informs him that she feels content and cared for. They share a kiss. She decides to go after realizing how late it is. They cuddle up and he tells her to wait until the sun rises, because he's not ready to let her go. Phyllis remembers the accident as she drives. She blurts out that she can no longer do this and slams on the brakes. Summer joins her brother at the bar in the Neil Winters Jazz Lounge, where they wish for a better year than the previous one. It must be. He explains that his conversation with his father went well. They understand that their mother still finds it difficult to see Danny with Christine. She probably made the right decision in leaving at that time. They consider whether it's a good thing that they haven't seen or spoken to Phyllis in a long time. He wishes that she isn't out causing difficulty for herself or someone person. They can't wait to show her that they can protect her. They chuckle about how much she detests losing or acknowledging her mistakes. He asks himself whether this year will be different and she will forgive him. He is unsure. Her children are shocked to see Phyllis again when she arrives. She said she had to relax after going for a drive. She will disprove them and release them. She will have a fresh start in 2025. Summer and Daniel are certain she thinks so, but even though Phyllis is aware that she has stated this countless times, she is sincere this time. She ended up driving back to the scene of her accident after being turned on by Danny and Cricket's make-out session. She could see the person driving the truck, and the memories came flooding back. Sharon wasn't the one. At first, it seemed obvious that it had to be her, but ever since, Phyllis has had glimpses of the reality. She is no longer able to ignore the reality. It was an elderly woman wearing spectacles and having wavy hair. According to Summer, they must inform Chance. Although their mother claims she won't hold Sharon responsible for the collision, she will hold her responsible for framing Daniel. Phyllis says she will also overlook Danny and Christine when they bring them up. She was reminded that she nearly perished when she thought back to her accident. It's time to think about the future and a fresh start. Her son acknowledges that he will need to witness it in order to believe it. He is aware of how difficult it is for her to adjust, even if she means well. Phyllis would not say she is sorry for pursuing Sharon. Her obsession with Nemesis would kill her, even though she was only attempting to protect her family. Even if she turns out to be mistaken, she must take a back seat and allow the investigation to continue. If she had to make a mistake in order to assist her family receive justice, then so be it. She argues that she will highlight what will make her kids proud, even though they are giving her the benefit of the doubt. They are concerned about that. Ian inquires about Nick's family's coping mechanisms outside of society. "Stop talking," says Nick. He threatens to have him taken back to prison. Ian maintains his physical and spiritual freedom. The policeman comes back to explain that his account is credible. He works as a chaplain in prison. Nick is informed by Ward that he must perform penance for the remainder of his life. Nick describes the Holy Roller as a deranged psycho to the police officer. She leaves since there is nothing she can do. Ian informs Nick that he is committed to demonstrating his redemption. Nick gets in his face and threatens to make him wish he had never been born if he does anything to upset anyone. Nick goes inside to see how Tessa and Mariah are doing. The news that Ian is free does not sit well with them. Nick claims that Ian is obviously there to stir problems and that he will stop him at all costs. Faith worries about witnessing her father's rage. Mariah screams about all Ian has done to her while he tells her he has a full mob with him. She is anxious about others around her, but she is over what he did to her. Nick questions whether he poisoned Sharon's medications. Mariah has also experienced this. Faith and Nick decide to visit the house to see how Sharon is doing after noticing that she never arrived. Tessa begins cleaning frantically and questions why a guy of such cruelty would have paused to save her life. When Mariah calls her mother again, she just receives voicemail. Tessa notes that Ian was in her line of sight for the majority of the night as she panics and paces. He probably couldn't have pursued Sharon. Mariah asserts that she is too strong for her husband to harm her in the same way he has in the past when she asks her if she is concerned about that happening again. She is adamant about protecting her family. Nick and Faith discover Sharon is absent from the tack house when they arrive. Faith phones his father and searches. Faith and Nick arrive at the ranch house. Faith is shivering, and Victor notices and wonders what's happening. It's Ian Ward. Nick declares he's back in Genoa City after being released from prison. He is informed that Sharon did not arrive tonight. When Nick called the police to report Ian, they just verified that his release was lawful. Authorities claim that he has settled his duty to society. Victor declares that he will find him since he hasn't paid his debt to me or this family. He calls. Jordan and Ian meet at the Red Door Motel. He remarks, "It looks like this year will be a good year," as he peers down at Sharon, who is gagged and bound on the bed. Jordan has used chloroform to keep her out. What are they going to do with her, she asks. He says, "Goodbye." Ward says they might be able to wrap everything up in a tidy bow. They make fun of the idea of stealing Sharon and accusing Phyllis of doing it. They discuss how poetic it would be to dump Sharon where she dumped Heather while sipping their drinks. The same manner that Sharon framed Daniel, they can do the same to Phyllis. Jordan is grateful for everything, but he is ready to turn the attention to Claire, who has been wandering around the Newman estate. She is committed to putting her in her proper position. Ian notes that reaching his objectives is helping her get closer to her own. She accuses him of treating her like a fool and attempting to snow her since he won't explain how. Ward reassures her that he respects her and views her as an equal. He explains his approach by saying that Mariah will be devastated by Sharon's passing. Parental love is the only thing that can help her. He intends to revert to his previous function as a father figure. That seems like a long way off to her. Ian claims that the first step was saving Tessa's life, and he is sure he can win Mariah back to him. He did, after all, succeed in winning Jordan's trust. She says, "I trust you, but it's on life support." He makes the argument that gaining Mariah's favor will allow them to approach Claire. The plot unfolds. Ian Ward and Jordan had been operating in the shadows for weeks. Ever since Sharon's demise, the duo had seen an opportunity to manipulate the situation to their advantage. Both cunning and calculating, Ian and Jordan were no strangers to deception. Their plan? To frame a prominent member of the community, someone whose fall from grace would send shockwaves through Genoa City. As they meticulously pieced together their plot, whispers of their scheming began to surface. Ian, ever the master manipulator, convinced Jordan that their target should be none other than, spoiler, a person close to Sharon who would make the perfect scapegoat. "It's all about perception," Ian explained, his voice dripping with malice. "If we control the narrative, the truth doesn't matter." Jordan hesitated for a moment. Though he wasn't new to shady dealings, the thought of framing someone for murder felt like crossing a line. But Ian's charisma and persuasive words made it difficult to resist. "Think about it," Ian continued, leaning in closer. "We'll be untouchable, and, spoiler, we'll take the fall. It's foolproof. Jordan finally nodded, his resolve hardening. All right, I'm in. What's the next step? The setup. The first phase of their plan involved planting evidence. Ian and Jordan worked tirelessly, breaking into, spoiler, S home under the cover of darkness. They left behind subtle but incriminating clues, a scarf with Sharon's DNA, a partially burned letter suggesting a motive, and other carefully curated items that would paint, spoiler, in a guilty light. Meanwhile, they started spreading rumors around town. Ian's network of informants and allies ensured that whispers of, spoiler, S alleged involvement reached the right ears. The seed of doubt was planted, and soon it began to grow. Nick reaches out. As the town's suspicion toward, spoiler, mounted, Nick Newman found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Sharon's death had left a gaping hole in his heart, and the idea that someone he knew could be responsible was almost too much to bear. But Nick wasn't one to sit idly by. Late one evening, after a restless day of questioning his own instincts, Nick made a decision that would change the course of events. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. "Dad, I need your help," Nick said as soon as Victor Newman answered. Victor, ever the patriarch, responded with his usual mix of concern and authority. "What's going on, son?" Nick took a deep breath before explaining the situation. He told Victor about the rumors, the evidence, and his growing suspicion that something wasn't adding up. Victor listened intently, his mind already racing with plans to protect his family and uncover the truth. "Leave it to me," Victor said firmly. "We'll get to the bottom of this." Victor's intervention. Victor wasted no time. He called in favors, hired private investigators, and began his own covert investigation. Within days, his team uncovered discrepancies in the evidence against, spoiler. The clues, while damning on the surface, didn't hold up under closer scrutiny. It became clear that someone was orchestrating a frame job. Armed with this information, Victor confronted Ian and Jordan. The encounter was tense, a clash of wits between two master manipulators. Ian tried to feign innocence, but Victor's relentless questioning and unshakable confidence left him rattled. "You think you can outsmart me?" Victor said, his voice low and menacing. "You've underestimated the Newmans for the last time." Jordan, sensing the walls closing in, began to crack under the pressure. He blurted out partial truths, enough for Victor to piece together the rest of their scheme. But Ian, ever the strategist, had one final card to play. The revelation. Just as Victor prepared to expose Ian and Jordan, a shocking twist emerged. Ian revealed that he had been working with an unexpected ally, someone from Sharon's past with a grudge to settle. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the already tangled web of deceit. Nick, who had been following Victor's investigation closely, was stunned. The idea that Sharon's death was part of a larger conspiracy was almost too much to comprehend. But Nick's determination to find justice for Sharon only grew stronger. The tension in the air was palpable as Ian and Jordan sat in the dimly lit backroom of a small diner on the outskirts of town. The room smelled of stale coffee and desperation, the perfect setting for their sinister plot. Ian, with his sharp features and calculating eyes, leaned over the table, his voice a low whisper. "We need to make this airtight. No loose ends. Sharon's death has to look like an accident, and Nick needs to be the one who takes the fall." Jordan nodded, his nervous energy betraying his calm exterior. "I've been going over the details. We'll make it look like Nick had the motive and the means. But we have to be careful. He's got connections, and his father, well, Victor Newman isn't someone you mess with lightly." Ian smirked, his confidence unwavering. "Victor might be powerful, but he's not invincible. Besides, if we play this right, even Victor won't be able to save his precious son." Across town, Nick Newman paced the living room of his penthouse, his mind racing. He'd received an anonymous tip that something wasn't right. Sharon had been missing for hours, and an eerie sense of dread gnawed at him. He'd tried calling her repeatedly, but there was no answer. Now, with every passing moment, his fear for her safety grew. Finally, Nick made a decision. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. After a few rings, a gruff voice answered. Victor Newman. Nick hesitated for a moment before speaking. Dad, it's me. I need your help. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Victor's voice softened, just slightly. Nicholas. What's going on? Nick took a deep breath. It's Sharon. She's missing, and I think someone's trying to set me up. I don't have all the details yet, but something doesn't feel right. Victor's tone shifted instantly, becoming sharp and authoritative. Where are you? I'm coming over. Meanwhile, Ian and Jordan continued their scheming. Jordan had brought a stack of fake evidence to the table, including forged emails, doctored photos, and a fabricated timeline that placed Nick at the scene of Sharon's supposed demise. This is brilliant, Ian said, flipping through the documents. Once the cops see this, they'll have no choice but to arrest Nick. And with him out of the way, we can move forward with our plans. Jordan's hands trembled slightly as he took a sip of his coffee. I just hope this doesn't come back to bite us. If Victor gets wind of what we're doing. Ian slammed his hand on the table, causing Jordan to jump. Enough about Victor. Stick to the plan, and everything will be fine. Victor arrived at Nick's penthouse within the hour. As he stepped inside, his imposing presence filled the room. Nick quickly brought him up to speed, explaining the anonymous tip and his growing suspicion that Ian Ward was involved. Ian Ward, Victor said, his voice laced with disdain. That man has been a thorn in our family's side for too long. If he's behind this, I'll make sure he pays. Nick ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. I just want to find Sharon and make sure she's okay. Can you help me? Victor placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. We'll find her, Nicholas. But first, we need to gather evidence. If Ian is trying to frame you, we need to prove it before the authorities get involved. As the hours ticked by, Victor called in some of his most trusted contacts to investigate Sharon's disappearance and Ian's potential involvement. Meanwhile, Nick couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. He decided to take matters into his own hands and began digging into Ian's recent activities. Nick's search led him to a small, secluded cabin on the outskirts of town. He remembered Sharon mentioning the place once, years ago, when she and Ian had crossed paths during one of his schemes. Determined to find answers, Nick drove to the location, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. When he arrived, the cabin appeared abandoned. But as he approached, he noticed faint footprints leading to the back door. Nick's instincts kicked in, and he carefully made his way inside. Back at the diner, Ian and Jordan were finalizing their plans when Ian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. What is it? Jordan asked, noticing Ian's sudden change in demeanor. It's a security alert from the cabin, Ian said, his voice low. Someone's there. Jordan's eyes widened. Do you think it's Nick? Ian's expression darkened. If it is, he's walking straight into our trap.